The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe.
Greater Salem, New Hampshire Chamber of Commerce presents Success in the 603, a podcast focusing on Granite Staters who have had success in the public or private sector. We'll hear stories of how these people came to be, where they are, and what you can do to get there too. Sit back and enjoy. You are in wicked awesome company.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Success in the 603. My name is Donna Morris, and I serve as the president of the Greater Salem Chamber of Commerce. And
I'm Craig Dufton. I'm with Keller Williams Realty. I'm also a small business owner here in Salem, New Hampshire, and proud chamber member.
the proudest.
Yes,
Woo-hoo.
This year I am.
So as you heard in our introduction, Success in the 603 is about having a conversation about a successful Granite Stater and learning a little bit about where they came from, how they got there, and most importantly for you out there to listen and learn from their experience and their tips and tricks to help you achieve your goals.
This is true. And our guest today is Bill Sherry, good friend of ours, a longtime Rotarian. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but he's from Windham, New Hampshire.
Well done,
and
Craig.
Thank you very much. You Windham people out there. Oh, sorry,
Windham.
And he's currently is the COO of the Granite United Way. He was a longtime volunteer at the United Way before that. Former board member and volunteer of the American Cancer Society. Bill worked for the National Grid for about 30 years.
Yes.
30 years. And he's a veteran of the Air Force of 17 years. He was a Master Sergeant. Bill's a charter member of my favorite Greater Salem Rotary Club, and he was also a Paul Harris Fellow there. Graduate of Brandeis University, MBA from Bentley, and we'll talk about his awards later on.
And most importantly, was very involved in the Greater Salem Chamber of Commerce, was on our board
Yes,
in the late 80s,
longtime board
early
member,
90s, and,
several times.
Yeah. So
Late 90s and early 2000s. Don't age me too quickly.
okay.
So welcome, Bill. Thank you for
Thank
being here. It's great to have you. Welcome to the show. So let's start out your early life. You were not born here in Windham. Where were you? Where'd you start out?
I started out in Watertown, Massachusetts. I grew up in the Boston area.
Okay. And you
Go ahead.
matriculated
I went to a local
school?
Catholic grammar school in Watertown. I went to Boston College High School in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and then on to Brandeis University after that.
Nice. And you studied politics.
I studied politics and economics at Brandeis, yes, after a failed effort at being a doctor and attempted pre-med.
And what were you thinking when you were thinking politics and economics at the time?
Graduate.
Just graduate?
Love it. Graduate.
We have a huge studio audience today, too,
Huge
just to
studio
let you know.
I think in the late 70s, early 1980s, candidly, the big growth in the market at the time were IT, tech, and engineering, and that wasn't my forte. And so I was, looking at something that could give me a good leg into the business community. So something in the area of marketing and communications, possibly government work. During the course of my high school time, I did an internship one summer at Speaker Tip O'Neill's office.
Oh, that's great.
Nice.
In Boston. That was an interesting experience. So
Lots of scotch in that? Was there
no
scotch?
Nope, not at the time.
Okay.
And then Ted Kennedy was senator, and so it was a really busy time in the Boston, Cambridge, Watertown area growing up. And the politics and economics degree was about giving me a good opportunity, giving me a good chance to get into the job market and something in the business sector.
So did you go right from that to Bentley?
No. I went to school at night at Bentley. I went right from. I graduated from Brandeis in May of 1982, and I started working for what was then Massachusetts Electric Company 1 week later.
Okay.
In a marketing and service type job, right out of college. And I've been working since I was 10 years old. I started as a caddy at a local golf course in Watertown, Mass. Yep. I wanted a bicycle, and my father said, "Well, if you want a bike, you're going to get a job."
Do you hear that?
Yep.
This generation, millennials and all that, did you hear that? You want something, you get a job, and you go buy it. Okay, just want to get that straightened out.
It's interesting. You're talking about the early life. In my teenage years, I caddied at golf courses. I worked at gas stations. I worked in supermarkets. I did painting. I did masonry work. I did roofing. You name it. And mostly at my father's insistence that I learned to go out and do these things. And it developed some useful skills. And then went right to work for the electric company right out of college, and I actually spent 32 years there working in a whole host of different roles. a lot of them in customer service, marketing, community relations, government relations, regulatory work. Eventually worked my way up to some senior executive roles in Massachusetts and New Hampshire.
So how's the Air Force tie in here? You're National Guard?
When I was in college, I had an uncle who was a brigadier general in the Air National Guard, and he and I were very, very close. And candidly, when I was one of those many college students who were trying to figure out where they were going, and my uncle had a big influence over me at the time, and he suggested I look into the Air National Guard. So I enlisted, and I took about 6 months out of school between my sophomore and junior year in college, and went off and did basic training and technical school, and then came back and continued on for a 17-year career in the Air National Guard while I finished college, and then went on to work at the electric company.
Wow, excellent. So it was your father's brother or your mother's?
One of those adopted family uncles.
Oh, okay. That kind of an uncle.
Yes.
Okay.
We all need those type of
Yeah,
people
we all
in our
have an
lives.
uncle like that.
You know.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's easier to find that guidance that's less emotion, like a friend or a confidant that's,
Yep. It was one of those, like many, teenagers at the time, you don't want to listen to your parents.
Yeah.
And he was a good fit at the right time, and we had some great conversations. And later on in life, you kind of learn that, your parents weren't that wrong. So
again,
it takes them a
take
while
note
to
of
get
this,
there.
kids. This is priceless stuff for generations beyond.
We'll save that piece of the conversation.
But did you? What was your relationship like with your dad, though? I mean, obviously, you had a very good relationship because he was telling you.
My father and I
do this, do that, do this, do that.
My parents have since passed, and I was very close with both my parents.
Excellent.
Yeah,
that's important.
Yeah.
Brothers and sisters?
One sister.
Where do you fall?
Younger sister.
Yeah,
I'm the oldest.
Yeah.
I'm the oldest. She's the youngest. She's a senior executive right now with General Electric, and has had a very successful career in her own right. A woman engineer, and lives down in Houston, Texas. So
nice.
Travels the globe doing work for GE. So very proud of her.
That's great. When you had the power company and GE, that's a symbiotic relationship.
Well, our
there.
father was in the business. My father built power plants for a living.
Cool.
So he was heavily involved in the construction of almost every power plant in New England during the course.
So he was like the foreman of it, or was he
directors of construction?
Wow.
Yeah, heavily. He was a mechanical engineer, World War II vet. Went to school on the GI Bill after World War II, and like many of the greatest generation, settled down in the Boston area. Built a house, built a family, built a career. Never moved the whole time they were there, and learned a lot.
And what'd your mom do in the early years? Just be a mom, or
she worked. She moved here from Canada during
not
World
just
War
be
II.
a mom? I'm sorry for that.
Never
I
that.
apologize.
She moved here during World War II. Came from Newfoundland, Canada. At the time, we're connected in that route.
Yes.
And the economy in Newfoundland at the time was very closely connected to the U.S. because of the war effort. She had family down here.
Sure.
And she came down to get a job. And after the war, stayed here. Met my father after the war. They got married, and she worked for a number of years for different companies in Boston, and got her U.S. citizenship, got her degree. And then after I was born, she stayed home, and then spent the rest of the time raising my sister.
Yeah, that's an interesting story too, because we talk about immigration and everything in nowadays, and we do have that Newfoundland connection. And a lot of my mom ended up meeting my dad at an Air Force base, and but she had cousins who had come down to Connecticut, Greater Boston. There's a tremendous amount of people that just came down to seize the opportunity to work, and they'd send money home because it was not good up there as far as the economy.
True.
So sorry, I digress. It's about you.
Before most of Massachusetts moved into New Hampshire, most of Montreal and Quebec moved into Maine and New Hampshire for work too, and they still like to vacation here. So
very close ties between the Maritimes and the Canadian provinces and New England.
Do you still have family up there, cousins and stuff?
I do.
You've been there lately?
About 5 years ago, my wife and I went up for about a month and spent time with the relatives and toured Newfoundland. So we won't do a Newfoundland tourism commercial right now, but if you've never been there, it's worth the trip.
It's beautiful. So how did you get to the 603?
How did I get to the 603? So I graduated in 1982 in May, went to work in June, got married in the fall, and started a family. And so 1982 was a very busy year for getting going. And my wife and I met in college, and so we've been together for almost 37 years now. And so raised the kids, and in the mid-90s, I'd been working for Massachusetts Electric through the 1980s up into the 90s, and had a number of different jobs in Massachusetts. And an opportunity came up for a local manager job here in Salem. And so I made the big move from Methuen to Windham. And the job, there was a gentleman named Tom King at the time who was a predecessor of mine. He was a founding member of the Salem Chamber of Commerce. And in fact, he just recently passed away, unfortunately. But I came in as the local manager for Granite State Electric at the time.
So the one right there on Lowell Road?
What is now Liberty Utilities on Lowell Road was Granite State Electric. And I spent many, many years there and got involved in the Salem Chamber, joined the Rotary Club that was serving Methuen and Salem, and ultimately ended up spinning off the Salem Rotary Club some 17 years ago now. And then held a number of jobs with Granite State Electric, would merge with National Grid, would become part of National Grid in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then progressively just had a number of other jobs at the corporate level in the company through those years.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about your jobs and your volunteer work, but we're going to pay some bills.
That's true. So we'd like to thank our sponsors that help Success in the 603 come to life. Enterprise Bank, thank you for your support. Enterprise Bank opened its doors on January 3rd, 1989. They're dedicated to the deep sense of purpose and it drives them today, that they are an independent community bank. Their team members, customers, shareholders, and citizens, they make a positive difference in the community they serve. They have over 24 branches in 19 communities throughout southern New Hampshire and Massachusetts, with more than 530 team members. So even as they grow over 30 years, they have always been and remained a genuine independent community bank, locally owned and locally managed. Their headquarters is actually in Salem, New Hampshire at 55 Main Street. You can stop by, or you can give them a call at 603-894-5631, or visit them on the web, www.enterprisebanking.com.
www.
I know. I'm going to say it.
Every week. We're going to say it every week.
www.
So, Bill, you get to the 603. You got your family going. You got a beautiful family. I love your family. And
thank you.
Where'd the volunteer spirit come from? Who instilled this? Because you've been volunteering your whole life. And
I honestly, you mentioned, Donna mentioned my father. I have to say it came from my dad. Because my father, as busy as he was in the utility business building power plants, was a Rotarian. So he was actively involved in the Rotary Club down in the Boston, several Rotary Clubs in the Boston area, heavily involved in town government in our church in Watertown, boards of selectmen, planning boards, all of those different things, as well as parish councils, and all through my life. So I think that spirit of community service, I grew up with it. And he'd come in from work, have a quick bite to eat, and he was off to some meeting. And my mother the same way. She was involved with the church groups and whatever was happening around town.
So they set a good example then.
I guess they did.
One that you can follow. Well, and you have followed that. I mean, the Rotary, the Chamber, and now you're in the nonprofit world. I don't know if you want to jump to that or...
let's talk about. I just wanted any other influences. Your dad, you had the family uncle who was a brigadier. Sure. This is the second mention of a brigadier general on our show, by the way. We had Jim Smith who was on our show too as well. Another.
I was very fortunate veteran. Over the course of my career and my continuing career. I've been very fortunate to work with some great people, and we've all had that benefit of mentors over time. With this week where we just celebrated International Women's Day, we were having a conversation at work about, well, what does that mean to some people? And I was able to reflect on my own career. And two of my best mentors over time were women that I reported to in the utility world. One of them was the first female president of Granite State Electric, and learned an awful lot about responsibility, hard work, and flexibility and accountability, and working for her. And she gave me tremendous autonomy, but you had to get things done. So, and we're still close. We're still connected. She's since retired. And the other...
What's her name?
Her name's Lydia Pastuzik.
Okay.
And the other was a woman named Cheryl LaFleur, who became the first woman president of New England Electric System, which was the parent company of Granite State Electric. And she's actually just now finishing a term on the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Wow. So, again, a heavy influencer about, positive role model, service leadership, and really respecting your colleagues and all working together, and understanding that really when you think of it, none of us can get anything done by ourselves. There's even folks that work for themselves have to rely on other people. And those of us that work in mid-sized organizations or large organizations, complex organizations, you have to rely on other people and you have to work together. So those are some of the things I really learned from them over time.
Those are great. That's great advice, especially to our listeners out there. Sometimes you think you have to take it all on, but if you have a good communication and a good team, you can be like 10 times more successful.
And I think all of those skills translate to the volunteer organizations too. You know, organization for, you know, your knowledge, the knowledge that you get, the people that you meet, the networking that you do, all seems to help everybody in their volunteer organizations one way or the other. You know, it's, for me, I love volunteering. You know, it drives my wife crazy sometimes, but you know, I'm always off to do one thing or another too. So I love that spirit about you, Bill, because
thank you. And I think I was fortunate over the time of my career that I worked for an employer who encouraged community involvement. It was essentially like the utility companies, much like you know, the banks, the law firms, and other companies, your firm, others that we can think of, saw community service and involvement as a key component of doing business in the community and being part of the community. So involvement with the Chamber of Commerce, the Chamber Board of Directors, the different subcommittees, involvement with the Rotary Club, was all about really being present. And not only being present as an individual, being present as a company, and supporting the organizations and supporting the community. And that's just evolved over time.
Excellent. What do you think? What's the most important thing that you've learned from your volunteering? Like, what's the biggest, I don't know, satisfaction that you've gotten from your volunteering over the years? Do you have an easy answer to that question, or is there something you can pinpoint that in your volunteer career that you were like really happy that you changed something, or someone's, you know, give us a great example of something that you've done that just has been a memory of yours.
No, I think
I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but
no, it's okay. You're used to doing that.
I do it every Thursday.
No, but I think the key, people get involved in volunteering for a whole host of different reasons.
Yeah.
And for me personally, it's about helping people. And I can't define specific. Sometimes it's small, sometimes it's larger, but we're fortunate to live where we live, not only in the 603 in New Hampshire, to get the commercial right, but not only in the 603, but even here in this state and even here in this country. We have our as a people, as a citizenry, we have access to things that other people in the world are still trying to come here to get.
Correct.
All right. And if you go back to, I'm a student of history, and not only as a politics major, but when you look back to our founding fathers and the way that our society was created, even in colonial times, we relied heavily on volunteerism. Okay, we took care of people through volunteerism.
Yep.
We took care of the immigrants that came in through Ellis Island, through volunteer social organizations. All right, this is the nature of our society, is this close blending of the business community, the individuals, and volunteerism. So, you know, thinking of specific examples, recently, you know, I think of the work the Rotary Club did over the last couple of years with a real focus on food insecurity.
Yep.
And we've done some really remarkable work around not only helping the food pantries, but the club members coming together, you know, at least monthly and preparing a meal at the Pleasant Street Food Pantry.
Correct.
And those are things that people are coming together and making an impact.
I think that we hear a lot from the different guests that we've had that they tend to be involved in volunteer organizations, and there seems to be a theme that if you put yourself out there, you're helping people, but what you get is immeasurable. You know, you get it back tenfold in just the great feeling like you made a difference and you're making a positive impact on the world. And I think that's something that people can take away. That go ahead, get involved.
And Salem here is a micro version of the country as a whole, though, because we really are a generous society. I mean, we, you know, when times are tough and things happen, you see the spirit of the real human spirit that we are all involved in. From, you know, we're doing it on a local level, but you see it when we were in Puerto Rico. We had issues with hurricanes and all that stuff. That brings out the best in humans. And I think our founding fathers were right. They knew that to take care of people needed to rely on volunteerism, but they also knew the value of this country too. Back then too as well, and one of the reasons why they wanted their own. But
that's true.
You know, we had somebody on our show that was like, you know, I don't think it's the business person's responsibility to be involved in their community. And I like kind of looked at him sideways. I'm like, I didn't say it was your responsibility to do anything, but I think it's very important for all business people to be involved. And I do like it how banks like Enterprise and the other banks ask their employees to get involved in local organizations. That's why we have so many. They're in the leadership conference. They're at Rotary Exchange Club, Lions Club, all these. We have great service organizations here in Salem, probably one of the best in the area. And, you know, how did you get involved in Rotary from Greater Salem Methuen. It was a Greater Methuen Salem.
The club name at the time was the
Methuen.
I think it was the Salem Methuen Club at the time, and it was a joint club that overlapped the border. There were a number of us, candidly, and the club met at lunchtime on Fridays, and there were a number of us who lived in New Hampshire that were having trouble meeting that schedule. And we said, well, and the club was getting larger, and the way that Rotary grows is spinning off, as you know, is spins off more clubs. And there were a handful of us that said we'd rather have a breakfast club. So could we do something in the Greater Salem area with a New Hampshire focus? And literally over coffee one morning, I think at the old Holiday Inn when it had a restaurant, we were sitting there saying, well, let's do this. And a matter of weeks later or months later, a charter was formed, and we had the minimum number of required members, and that was 17 years ago.
That's great.
And we've done some great work in the community, and we're still closely aligned with the Mother Club, as it's called in Rotary language, or the Methuen Club. There's a lot of close ties between Salem and Methuen.
So we're going to take another commercial break, but
Sure.
when we get back, we're going to talk about your transition from volunteering for nonprofits to actually working for one.
Sure.
So it is tax season, people, so we would like to thank our sponsor, Travis Terry & Company, CPA. Travis Terry & Company operates on a foundation of honesty and integrity and hard work for you. Located at 25 Main Street in Salem, New Hampshire, they make taxes less taxing. How great would it be to just have a professional do your taxes this year? Give them a call at 603-898-2511, or you can visit them at 25 Main Street, or visit them on the web, www.travisterrycpa.com. Thank you, Travis.
Yes, high tea.
Yeah. So, we want to talk a little bit about, so that was a big transition. Can you talk a little bit about leaving National Grid and going to Granite United Way?
Sure. So I had a very good career in the utility business. I was 32 years between New England Electric System, Granite State Electric, National Grid, and then Liberty Utilities. And companies go through changes, and so the company went through some changes, and I had the opportunity to take an early retirement at the time. And I took a few months and did a little soul searching to try to figure out what do I still want to do with the rest of my working career. And I'd spent all that time in the energy business, but I'd also spent almost as many years doing volunteering for organizations like United Way, the American Cancer Society, the Chamber of Rotary. I'd done some work at the local level. I'd done some volunteering at the national level. And I really wanted to see if I could focus something in this space. And one thing led to another, as job searches go. And I ended up coming to work for Granite United Way as the Chief Operating Officer. So now Granite United Way is the largest United Way in New Hampshire. We serve about 85% of the state. We're one of a network of United Ways across the country. There's about 1,100 United Ways across the country. We interact with and serve probably 700 to 800 agencies in New Hampshire. We have approximately 22,000 donors in the state. And this year we'll raise about $9 million to put back into the communities. So as the Chief Operating Officer, I'm one of those folks that kind of, we're a business. And people talk about the nonprofits as a business. We're a business. We have over 50 employees. We have 7 offices around the state. We have all of the same issues that other businesses have, like health insurance costs, payroll, facilities, IT, cleaning toilets, all the things that go along with it. And I'm responsible for all of that behind the scenes to make sure that we're doing it as effectively and as efficiently as we can, because unlike the for-profit company where you're returning your profits to shareholders, in the case of a nonprofit company, we're putting our profits into the mission. So we want to make sure that we're keeping our overheads as efficient as we can so that we can put the dollars into the community. I also run our 211 operation, which is a 24/7 social service hotline. And 211 New Hampshire we serve the entire state. The month of February, we took 7,000 phone calls from people in New Hampshire looking for help, everything from, scheduling free tax services through the VITA program to answering calls from somebody suffering a substance use disorder and referring them to a clinician in real time on the phone, to a homeless person looking to get into a shelter. So in that particular case, I've been able to transition my industry experience, in particular in the customer service world, to helping run 211 behind the scenes for Granite United Way.
And that's been around for a while now. How long's 211 been around?
211 just celebrated its 10th year last year.
And I think more people out there need to know about it. You think 911, you think 411, 211 for social services. If you're in need of help to get connected, like you just said, you have some type of problem that you guys can help connect them with the resources to address it. So
that's true.
I shout it from the rooftops and tell everybody, 211 if you're...
211 is available nationally. There's approximately 80 211 centers across the country. Most of them are operated by United Way organizations, and the others are standalone, all nonprofit. And they all operate in a similar manner. And you can either call 211, just 3 simple numbers, and somebody will answer the phone. You won't get an IVR. Somebody will answer the phone. Or you can go online to 211nh.org and help yourself.
That's your own time. Yeah, and you think about it. It's like it is kind of. It's good that there's someone there because like 911 is a crisis type of thing. 211, there are social crises. You need to be calling and finding out how you can get the help that you need. So that's great that United.
How long have you been COO?
A little over 4 years now.
Okay, and were you in any other position before COO, or were you, I know you were volunteering there for years, but
I spent 30 years as a United Way volunteer, and I've been a United Way board member for over 7 or 8 years prior to that.
Why pick the United Way 30 years ago?
How did I pick you as a volunteer?
Yeah, just curious. There's
lots
of places to volunteer.
Massachusetts Electric at the time was, like many companies, runs United Way campaigns.
Yeah,
and people donate to United Way. People have donated to United Way for over 100 years through payroll deduction. All right, so like many companies, that employee annual campaign was going on, and at the time I was one of the newest employees, and the newest employee got to handle the pledge forms and help with the employee campaign. And then that led to a committee, and then that led to something else, and then that led to something else, and the journey has gone on since then.
Oh, interesting. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So what do you think about this nonprofit world? So you have 50 employees, but I'm curious about your take about, because one of the challenges, we've talked and you've helped me early on with my nonprofit world, because I switched from for-profit world, and managing volunteers. Like, what is your tips and tricks out there? Because they don't have to volunteer, and
that's true.
So I'm just curious, what would you share? What would be your best nonprofit management advice for inspiring others and managing volunteers?
Taking the time to talk to people. We really need to take the time to talk to people and find out what's driving them. Why are they interested in volunteering? What is it they want to get out of it? I think as a nonprofit, in dealing with a volunteer of all different levels, be it a volunteer who's helping stuff envelopes for a mailing, or a senior executive who's volunteering on your board as your chairman, or any number of levels in between, we have to be respectful of their time. Most of the folks that are volunteering are working for the most part, and they've got their day jobs working for their business. So they come into the nonprofit volunteering their time, and not only their time, but their talent and their expertise and their dollars and their resources. So we as the nonprofit leaders need to think about what is it we need for them to focus on now. We spend a lot of time at United Way, at Granite United Way in particular, on what is it we're asking in particular our leadership volunteers. What are we asking them to do? We have them for this hour, these 2 hours, this meeting. What do we hope to accomplish in that meeting? What information are we sharing with them? So there's a lot of discussion from a staff perspective over that. The worst thing I think we can do as a nonprofit is take that volunteer for granted, because you won't know that you upset them. You won't know something happened. They'll just walk. And they just suddenly won't be available.
How many volunteers are in the Granite United Way?
Oh my goodness, that's a good question. We're upwards of, I want to say 2,500 volunteers last year in terms of the organization overall. Now remember,
that's amazing.
Granite United Way operates something called Day of Caring, which is the biggest volunteer activity we organize once a year. And I would say they're more like days of caring. But in and around September, we'll organize volunteering activities across New Hampshire and marshal hundreds of volunteers to go out and do all kinds of community projects. Right. So in the Salem area, in recent years, we've helped to paint the classrooms at Success by 6. We've cleaned up, the volunteers have cleaned up Fields of Dreams, gone into other smaller nonprofit locations where some help has been needed, done planting and painting, and there's other type of volunteering that's more long-term, over-time volunteering, somebody that could help a nonprofit with a business plan or prepare their IRS reporting, because nonprofits have IRS reporting too, just like everybody else does. So there's a whole host of different things. What's interesting is if you're somebody who's interested in looking for a volunteering opportunity in New Hampshire, you can go to Volunteer NH online, and they actually have a volunteer matching website. Okay, it's a piece of software.
That's fantastic.
It is, and United Way helps support it. So if you're an
It's
entity, volunteernh.org. Just
okay.
Google Volunteer New Hampshire.
Okay.
And what's
just Google everything nowadays.
Just
Who
Google
cares
it.
about the .com or whatever's at the end of it?
But if you're an organization that's looking for volunteers, you can go onto that site and post your volunteering opportunity. And then if you're a volunteer who's looking to volunteer, you can go search it.
That's cool.
That's
it's like
great.
an
It's
Indeed for volunteers, basically.
Yeah, I was going to say Match.com, but okay.
Oh, all right. Well, it's not very romantic, but
Putting your
well, I guess it
I'll
could
leave
be.
Feel the
that to
love
you.
of
If you fall in
volunteering.
love with volunteering. There you go.
There
Fall
you
in
go.
love with volunteering, everybody.
That's great.
Words of wisdom. So, I wanted to ask you because you've been great with me over the last few years because I always ask you questions. You're always taking the time to go out of your way, and I know that you've been very involved in the American Cancer Society too, and you've had cancer in your family, and everybody has cancer in their family. And can you talk about that part of your volunteering too? Did you the American Cancer Society?
Sure.
The Relay for Life in particular is a great. Obviously, we're doing a different version of it this year, I hear.
I understand that too. So, and our families had a long cancer journey, and I'll spare you, but it started back in 2001, and around 2004, 2005. We were approached by some folks locally who wanted to bring Relay for Life to Salem.
Yep.
And my wife, who was a cancer survivor, was invited to be a speaker at the kickoff event, which was held in the cafeteria or the culinary arts kitchen at Salem High School at the time. And there were probably all of 20 people in the room. And we came out of that event with everybody in the family on the committee with some assignment or another. And I've been involved with the American Cancer Society ever since then, and I went on to serve. We're still involved in Relay for Life in the Salem area, and that's going into its, I think, 15th year now. We've raised well over $1 million, maybe $2 million in that time.
Wow.
The event has changed its format as time has gone on, like everything does. And I also did work I served on the New England Division Board for 6 years. Now the New England Division has merged into a national organization, so the American Cancer Society has one national board. And I've done some work on the advocacy front as well around cancer and research because, believe it or not, the federal government is the single largest source of funding for cancer research. And the American Cancer Society is the single largest source of private funding for cancer research. So with
Two things I didn't know.
Yep. So, from the standpoint of, cancer survivors and long-term survivorship, research is really the key. So that's why I do what I do from that perspective.
And anybody still on the board from the family?
Not at the moment. No.
Okay. No, just you?
Yeah.
They're not on the board,
No,
but I know
not on the board.
you're volunteering.
We're still
every year.
involved.
We go to Chief Walk and eat Chinese food and support it and
It's a
do whatever we
win-win
can
right
take.
there.
Yeah.
It's good. It's been a great talk. Like 32 minutes just goes like, see you later.
Sure.
Bill, we wanted to get I know we joked about your quote before we went on here, but we've got a quote that we always get from people because everybody has that one thing that they think of all the time that they rely back on that one phrase or quip from their dad or from someone. Yeah. What do you got?
So I'll leave you with a few words to think about. Okay. In particular, as people are, don't be afraid of hard work. Okay, that's really of all generations, of all ages. Don't be afraid of hard work. You need to be patient. Okay, because patience, but patience not in terms of waiting for something to come to you, but patience while you're working hard. And you need to persevere. Okay, and just keep at it. And along with that, you need to be adaptable because you don't know what that next opportunity is that's coming. So,
or where it's coming from.
Right.
Yeah, have your eyes open for it, for sure.
It's definitely reflective of a lot of conversations that we've had over the last 15 or so weeks. And that same theme that you hear from all people that have had great success is that they're determined, they persevere, they work hard, and they set goals for themselves. Because what you talked about was your patience is your goals. If you set a small goal, you be patient, you hit your goal, you hit another goal, you keep going and you keep going and you try harder and harder and harder. And definitely hard work is one of my favorites. I'm not about to walk away from hard work. Bill, it's been great to have you.
Thank you.
It's we'll have to have you on again, and you can keep us updated on how everything goes with the American Cancer Society and, of course, Granite United Way.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Bill. You've been great, and keep up the good work. You're doing some good stuff to make a positive difference out there, and I hope people are inspired and follow your lead.
Thanks for the conversation.
You've been wicked awesome company.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.